The Northfield Holistic Health Summit 2025 was pleased to present a breakout session led by Dr. Noel Aldrich on the topic of brain food. This presentation was made to the participants who attended the Holistic Health Summit on May 10th, 2025.
Good afternoon, and this is the final elective lecture led by Dr. Aldrich, who probably many of you know. I've known him for 11 years. He's my good friend, and we, along with some other people, were charter members and founders of the Northfield Community Toastmasters Club. Communication is one way to keep brain function going. And Northfield is so lucky to have a Toastmasters Club here in town. Check us out sometime. Talk to Dr. Noel. Now I get to introduce him, and it's my privilege. Dr. Aldrich grew up in Northfield on a family farm, and he thrived in a caring family that had all the fresh farm produce available to them. As he grew and distanced himself from farm life, he came to a health crisis that opened his eyes on how much nutrition had been lost to modern conveniences and fast-paced living. Dr. Aldrich returned to graduate school. He was just Noel then, but he returned to graduate school to study nutrition, and he graduated from the University of Minnesota doctoral program in 2013. Soon afterward, he started Nutrition Proportion here in Northfield. Dr. Aldrich is also an adjunct professor at Notre Dame, Maryland University, where he aids the instruction of future doctors of clinical nutrition. This whole day has focused on brain health and maintaining or improving our cognitive abilities as we age. In this presentation, Dr. Aldrich will present some of the key foods that have been identified as essential for maintaining healthy brain activity. Please welcome Dr. Noel Aldrich as he presents brain food. Brain food. Dr. Aldrich.
Thank you, Ruth. Welcome, everyone, as we wrap up this day talking about the brain. Let's get a little bit philosophical here for a moment, just thinking about our brains, and that we're talking about an organ of our body that we can actually use to think about it. Doesn't happen with any of the other organs. But certainly the most complex construction in the world. And we're trying to figure out today a little bit more about how to care for it, how to be good stewards of it. When I look at the brain, think about the brain, and you've seen some of these presentations today and some of the different details that they've been giving, you begin to recognize an amazing design. Another word I've heard today is an amazing architecture. So think about going to an art gallery and you look at one of the classics and you begin to study that classic, the nuances of it, the way the shading happens, the changes in color, or maybe you're more into blueprints and you like to look at architecture. One of the things I do like to look at is architectural drawings, and I recall a time when I was working up at the University of Northwestern, and one of the professors pulled out the original blueprints for Nazareth Hall. Now, I was working in there in the early 2000s. Nazareth Hall was built back almost at 1900. It was fascinating to look at those drawings and see what had changed over the years. And we were talking today about how the brain changes as we move from one season of life to another. Whether you're looking at art or looking at the architectural drawings, you're looking at design. You're looking at intentionality, putting those pieces together. So when we begin to consider where we're moving to in the future, We're hearing a lot more about robots and all the capabilities, AI and all of its capabilities. But one thing stands out pretty clearly is that it took design. It took architecture. And as these advances in robotics continue, I personally see it simply as more and more evidence that a creator is behind it all. So a creator, I believe, is behind how our brain functions. As a nutritionist, one of the things that I will describe to my clients is you do not suffer from a deficiency of a drug. You suffer from a deficiency of a particular nutrient. We just need to figure out which one it is, how to get it in, how to make it most effective. Sometimes that takes time. But we want to look at the brain today and understand some of its components. This first one here, we've already heard Dr. Kotulski mention, 42% of adults over 55 will develop dementia by age of 95. That was just this year, came out in March. Another one, between 2000 and 2019, we saw an increase in Alzheimer's of 145%. Marked off there 2019 because that was right before COVID started. So this had nothing to do with the virus. This is just our lifestyle having this effect. And anxiety disorders are affecting about 20% of our population. That number might have also been increasing with all of the isolation and lack of community that's been going on. All of these related to the brain. So as I talk about brain food today, I want to look at it a little bit differently. I want to look at that design, that structure of the brain. What is its structure? What is its function? What about the energy of it? And see how the foods are related to those categories. So some additional brain facts. Some of them you may have heard from some of the other presentations today. Your brain's about 70% fat. Just meditate on that for a moment. You think low-fat foods is a good idea then? Maybe not. The brain will grow 3 times its size in the first year. How important is fat for those newborns? And the brain contains about 100 billion neurons. Now we're talking about numbers approaching what we're talking about in the national debt. The brain contains about 20% of your total cholesterol. You sure you want to reduce your cholesterol? Is that the best recommendation? The brain is also about 75% water. So how much water are you consuming each day to keep that filled? And the brain consumes about 20% of your body's energy each day. These are some of the important brain facts we want to consider as we think about the foods that are going to most benefit your brain. And the brain can perform about 1 quintillion calculations per second. Anyone know what a quintillion is? 1 million trillions. 1 million trillions. And that just happened right there. So take all the seconds in the day, now you're really calculating. This is right on the level of all the supercomputers. That's what you got up here. That's why we want to be a good steward of it. So if 70% of our brain is fat, we need to know a little bit about fat. This is a chemistry model of a fat molecule, or a triglyceride is another term that you have heard. Triglyceride meaning 3 fat acids combined together by a glycerol molecule. These are 3 of the possible models of fatty acid chains that would be in that. It could be a saturated fat chain, which is on the top. It just has a bunch of squiggly lines, which means a bunch of carbons and hydrogens, no double bonds. Then we have the monounsaturated fats, which has one mono unsaturated bond in it. That's a double bond with the red there. Or you have the polyunsaturated fats, many, many double bonds that are listed there. Those are the three general types of fatty acids that you will find that your body is either making or taking in from the foods that you're consuming. And since our body is our brain is 70% fat, this is where these are the molecules that are making up your brain. This is the structure that we see. As we mentioned, 100 billion of these neurons up here in your brain. The general structure being that the dendrite is where the cell body is. It's receiving information from all the smaller little branches, and then it has a long branch called the axon. That's where it sends out information to the next nerve. So basically, most nerves are one directional. They're always sending information in one direction through that axon, if everything is running correctly. This is simply another picture of the same thing, a little bit more simplified. But what I want to identify here is noticing this little section of the axon that kind of looks like a bunch of sausage links all connected together. These are known as the myelin sheath. So that long axon that your nerve cell has is where all that energy, that nerve impulse is traveling, and we've got this myelin sheath wrapped around that entire length of that nerve cell. This is a little more close-up of it, and you can see the myelin sheath is like a insulation wrap all around the core of that nerve cell. That insulation wrap, picture some different things of life that you've seen like that. Maybe that's like the wrapping the hot dog up in the bun, or as my daughter used to enjoy when she was younger, taking and wrapping her up in a blanket, just rolling her until she was all tight in there, and then give it a good pull and watch her unravel. But that's the myelin sheath, wrapped up to insulate the nerve cell, to keep it protected. This is the layer that often is damaged when you're talking about multiple sclerosis. The myelin sheath is breaking apart. And now the communications are not happening like they should. This is even more close up. We're getting farther down in the microscope. The myelin sheath is made up of these lipid layers. So you see the little blue balls, little red balls, and all the little squiggly black lines. Those squiggly black lines are the fatty acids, the saturated fats, the monounsaturated fats, the polyunsaturated fats. They're all connected together, forming these layers that are wound together to form that insulation. So your nerve cell is insulated by a lot of fat. And just closer up, look at that. That's where those fatty acids are. So again, we're looking at the design. This is one of the things that fascinates me about nutrition, that fascinates me about life, is to be able to look at what is the design of this? How does it work? And be able to put the puzzle pieces together. This is simply another image of the same thing, but also a reminder, it's not just the nerve cells that have this bilipid layer. Every one of the cells of your body has this bilipid layer. Another way I like to think of it is thinking of a water balloon. And that membrane of the water balloon is the cell membrane that's made up of these bilipid layers. And so the inside of your cell has contents, and as long as that cell membrane doesn't break, all the contents of the cells stay inside and operate accordingly. Now, it is an amazing design. Water's able to pass through. Nutrients are able to pass through. Some of these blue structures here are other structures within that membrane that allow certain nutrients in and out. So it's a fascinating design. But mostly we want to concentrate here on these fatty acid legs. And what does that mean for us as far as brain foods? So what are our fat sources? This is a list of sources of fat since 1890 in the United States to the early 2000s. You'll notice in the first list, 1890s, a lot of saturated fat options: lard, tallow, chicken fat, coconut oil, peanut oil. How many of you have enjoyed some lard or tallow recently? Okay, some of you, good. A lot of saturated fat in that first level, a lot of very easily accessible oils like the olive oil, coconut oil. Then you see a great shift in the next 100 years. Goes to soybean oil as a number one, canola oil is number two, and corn oil. These you're hearing described today as seed oils. Oils that were extracted from seeds with great pressure and processing to be able to get the oil out of them. And we also call them vegetable oils. The H besides that means that these are typical oils that are hydrogenated. If I hydrogenate these oils, it causes that liquid oil to now to be able to be solid at room temperature. One of the classic examples of that has been margarine. Margarine was simply taking corn oil, hydrogenating it, and it would be solid at room temperature. Another one is Crisco. How many of you remember Crisco? I grew up with it. I remember it. Cottonseed oil that was hydrogenated. The challenge with hydrogenation is that's where we introduce trans fats. And trans fats are now being recognized as a fat source that's very unhealthy. But as you can see on our chart here, these are the leading oils that are being used in our society. Soybean oil, canola oil, but particular soybean oil and corn oil, most common at the restaurant when you order anything that's deep fat fried. That's going to be soybean oil or corn oil. What happens when that oil gets deep fat fried or gets heated for a long time? When I was at the University of Minnesota, one of the professors that I worked with had her own research laboratory, and she purchased a deep fat fryer and put it right in her lab. And then she got hold of some fresh corn oil, put it into the heater, turned on the switch, and then just began to take a sample of that oil every half hour and then do tests on that oil to see what's happening. And what she was able to document is that the longer that oil was heated, the more those oils were breaking into smaller components that were more carcinogenic. So if that oil is not changed by the end of the day, if it takes a couple days for that oil to change, the longer that oil's in the heater, the more carcinogenic are those foods that are coming out of the deep fat fryer. And I have talked with some people who work at the fast food restaurants, and they have commented they probably would eat foods on Monday from the deep fat fryer, but probably not by Wednesday. They can tell the difference. You'll notice that on this chart by 2012, we were seeing tallow and butter beginning to come up the line again. I think that's in part by knowledge, as more people began to recognize, hey, some of these original fats from the 1800s are actually pretty good for us. What does it take to get oil out of a corn kernel or oil out of a canola seed? This is a process that you will find online. The seed, once it's been squeezed, that oil is going to go through an acid wash. That acid wash is going to help to purify some things. It's going to be at about 176 degrees. Then it's going to go through a naturalization or neutralization process, because at this point, there's some offending odors coming off from that acid wash. After that, it's going to go through some bleaching process, because now the color of the oil doesn't look so great. Finally, it's going to go through deodorization so that it's a pleasing product in the bottle. Once you've gone through 4 different heating processes, and we already mentioned heating the oil in the deep fat fryer wasn't a good thing. Very likely the quality of the oil, corn oil, soybean oil, the vegetable oil in that bottle at the supermarket is not a healthy oil source that's going to be beneficial to your brain. In fact, some research has come out in 2017, the canola oil was actually linked to increases in Alzheimer's disease. So the more you consumed of it, the more you were at greater risk of worsened memory. So going back to these fat and fatty acid structure, what is it about this fatty acids that we need to be concerned about? Is it simply just that there's some unhealthy fatty acids out there? One of the things we've seen with the amount of energy that the brain uses is it's a very active organ. And we've talked about today how to keep your cognitive abilities. You want it to stay active. Because it's active, it means it's also going to be producing a lot of challenges to keeping things in balance. One of those challenges is called the reactive oxygen species. This is a molecule of oxygen that's produced in your brain through regular metabolic processes. It's normal, but because your brain has so much more of this going on, it's going to be more of that in your brain compared to other areas of your body. So your body needs good insulation against those reactive oxygen species. That's where the fat comes in. We need some good quality fats to help for the insulation. These are some of the reactive oxygen species, simply meaning that when oxygen goes into your brain to fulfill its reaction, producing some energy, that sometimes some of those oxygens are going to have an extra charge on it, a little extra zip that is hard to control if the body doesn't have all the enzymes and nutrients just right. And those extra reactive species can come along to a fatty acid chain like this one. This is the omega-6 linolenic acid chain, and it is going to be very attracted to that double bond because that's where that energy excess is, and it's going to grab hold of that. And once it does that, now that particular fatty acid has been disrupted, and that might affect the insulation, that might affect the cell membrane. I specifically point out linolenic acid because that is the fatty acid in corn oil and soybean oil, vegetable oil. We're very rich in omega-6. Your body does need some omega-6, but in our lifestyle, ideally, omega-6 and omega-3 would be balanced in this way, about 2 to 1. And if you ate the diets that your grandparents ate, that'd be about where it was. This is our balance now. It's about 12 to 1. Some literature even says 20 to 1, because we're getting that from corn and wheat and grapeseed oil and confinement lot meat that are all going to be more leaning towards omega-6 compared to the omega-3. We get omega-3 from flaxseed, from dark leafy greens, from cattle that are fed on grass pasture, and we get it from cod liver oil or fish oils. Those are the omega-3s. Here's another chart comparing then the different cooking oils that we have available. Everything in red are those oils that are higher in the omega-6. We've already seen canola oil there, but there's oils even more saturated with the omega-6. I like to work with the orange line on down. I promote olive oil. I like lard and palm oil, as well as the tallow and the coconut oil, because these have very little omega-6 and are going to be much more rich in omega-3 The green ones almost have no omega-3 in that, really no omega-3 in there either. Those are saturated fats. Your body can use those very well. So the saturated fats then, coconut oil, butter, ghee. And is anyone familiar here with what is ghee? Or does that sound like a strange word, okay? Ghee is simply the Indian name for clarified butter. So if you've taken and placed a stick of butter in the pot and melted it down, and now you've got the yellow oil and the white solids above it, if you skim off all those white solids, that's ghee. That's just the name the Indians gave it for clarified butter. And you will find ghee and coconut oil on the same shelf in the supermarket, very accessible. The unsaturated fats, these would be the omega-3 rich oils, olive oil, flaxseed oil, even hemp seed oil works great. Fish are going to be a great source of omega-3s. All the ocean fish, the salmon, the pollock, the cod, great sources for omega-3. And the pasture-raised beef are going to have much more omega-3 as they have processed from grasses, which have not created inflammation like the corn does. And one of my favorites, I think almost every presentation I do talk about cod liver oil. It is great for omega-3s, which is the fish oil, but it also has vitamin D and vitamin A, which your nerves will use very well. So, those individuals who consumed at least 7 grams a day of olive oil had a 28% lower risk of dementia. 7 grams isn't that much, about a tablespoon or so. And also coconut oil improved cognitive scores in patients with Alzheimer's. So they were already diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but by starting to take coconut oil, they began to see improved cognitive scores. These ideas are not new. You heard Dr. Kotulski earlier talking about working with multiple sclerosis. Dr. Walls works down in Iowa, and she has also made this protocol very popular, the Walls protocol. Dr. Walls herself has multiple sclerosis. She was in a wheelchair also, and she identified the foods that helped her get out of the wheelchair, and now she is on a speaking circuit around the country telling people about the way the foods will help to renew your nervous system, renew your energy, and help you get back on your feet. Also, there's the Bredesen protocol, which focuses on coconut oil. And I believe Dr. Koss is certified in the Bredesen protocol, being able to use healthy oils to renew the brain and help it to function more effectively. So as we look at that structure that has the myelin sheath, that has the bilipid layers, we see the importance of the oils, and so we will identify then these sources in particular, the olive oil, the coconut oil, the fish, the grass-fed meats, are going to be able to provide the healthiest oil sources for your brain. Then we move on to the function of the nerve cells. The function is going to involve all that communication that we think about neural activity. That function is going to be passing on from one nerve cell to another, from that end of that axon, releasing some of its information to the next nerve that's picking it up with the dendrites. Something that happens in a split second. As that energy comes down the axon, it causes a release of those pockets of chemicals that are going to stimulate the next nerve and cause its electrical impulse to move on down the chain. In some of the measurements, they have measured some of these cells communicating that electrical information as fast as 250 miles an hour. These are some of the transmitters, neurotransmitters that your body produces. Some of these names might be familiar to you, like dopamine and serotonin, adrenaline. And these are the ones that would be some of those that we can measure by testing to see, do you have adequate levels? Is there anything that's stopping your body from producing these types of neurotransmitters? But where do those neurotransmitters come from? Where are they generated? Certainly, many of them are generated in the brain, but a lot of it is generated in your gut, in your intestines. And so sometimes you will hear the term that your gut is your second brain. There's a lot more going on down here. If you get this right, then this is much more possible. And as you can see with this drawing, normal microbiota, normal bacteria in your gut is going to be able to produce a tolerance in your immune system, a balance in your immune system. It's also going to be able to cause a good gut barrier. The barrier in your gut, in your intestines, is the thinnest of all the different layers in your body. It's the thinnest because that's where your body is trying to absorb good nutrients. If that barrier gets broken, now we're starting to talk about inflammation, allergies, and the other term is used as dysbiosis. So it's very dependent on the bacteria that's in your gut. On the other side, you can see stress from the brain can impact your microbiota. As you get under stress, that's going to affect the communication that comes down to your intestines, and you feel it, don't you? You get stressed and it gets tight down here, maybe slows down a bowel movement, gets crampy, and then you get crabby. So that disrupts the microbiota. That means the immune system now is activated. Inflammation could begin. Now that inflammation's beginning, now a whole cycle might be starting and the barrier might be broken down. So we see then that there's a very important component that the microbiota, the microbes, the bacteria in your gut play for you to stay in balance. How many bacteria cells do you have in your body? You have more bacteria in your whole body than you have of your own cells. There's more of other than there is of you. Or maybe we need to think a little bit broader. All of me is more than I've been looking at. It's not just my DNA, but it's all the DNA that make up me. So I want to just focus on a couple bacteria then. Where do we get that bacteria? One of them is fermented foods. Hopefully you know some of these names. All of them come down through history, through tradition, and have kept generations healthy over the years. All of these are formed from very specific bacteria that have very specific benefits in your body when you consume them on a regular basis. You might be familiar with some of those that are dairy-based, but it doesn't have to be dairy-based. If you have some dairy challenges, go for the non-dairy ones, but get more bacteria into your body, these healthy bacteria that will support good, strong brain health. We see that those who have good bacteria, good fermentation intake, have less depression. And that one of those particular bacteria is called the Lactobacillus family. There's a lot of different bacteria in this family, but we see that with this bacteria, it lowers inflammation in the gut, makes the gut barrier stronger, reduces stress, so that's more towards the brain processing, and alters GABA receptor expression. GABA was one of those neurotransmitters. So the bacteria is affecting how our brain is receiving information. This is a little bit longer list of two of the different families, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterial. Both of these you'll find commonly in yogurts. They're also very common in the sauerkraut. If you make your own starter for sourdough, some of this is going to be in there. And each one of them have been studied for their benefits to your well-being. But you don't have to be a scientist to enjoy them. Just enjoy some delicious fermented foods. One of the interesting components that's coming out of this research is that these bacteria produce a chemical called butyrate. Butyrate is another short-chain fatty acid. Very, very short, but it's actually a signal to the brain of well-being. So when you eat these fiber sources, the fresh vegetables, the fresh fruit, the oatmeal or the beans, as well as the fermented vegetables, you are giving food to these bacteria to begin to eat. Your body can't do anything with fiber itself, but the bacteria love the fiber, and they begin to chew on this, and they produce butyrate. Butyrate is a very essential fuel for your colon cells. So if you want a healthy colon, you want to be eating fermented foods to help strengthen that colon, because that's also going to help the transport of food through your body. If you have better butyrate levels in your body, you might have a more regular bowel movement each day. But that butyrate also signals the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that travels from your brain all the way down to the end of your gut. And so as that butyrate stimulates the vagus nerve, you feel more well-being. So we had some opportunities today in your lunch. Some fresh vegetables, some rye bread or oatmeal bread, whichever you chose. You gave your body some good fiber to work on. How about beans? Is beans a favorite for anybody? Okay. What kind of beans? Any kind of beans. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a seed bean, whatever seed bean you enjoy most, whether that's a black bean, garbanzo bean, or even lentils. Lentils are great. Whole cultures are based on lentils. All of those provide the fiber that your body is going to be able to use and turn into butyrate. Butyrate-producing bacteria are associated with lower Alzheimer's risks. Butyrate can help against Parkinson's disease. And it helps encourage the production of GABA in the gut. GABA is one of those nutrients that helps you relax at night, helps you go to sleep. You can buy GABA supplements to help you fall asleep. Maybe you just need some more fiber. In fact, in the research, butyrate is showing effective work for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, even autism, as ways to help the brain to revive, renew. Our body needs this butyrate. So those are the function-based foods, the fermented foods, the fresh fruits and vegetables, beans and whole grains, particularly because they're providing fiber that is going to give nutrients to the bacteria. Then we get to the energy part. This part, to me, is fascinating, as we've been talking about how to help our brains function. I haven't heard a lot yet today about energy. But your brain, as we already said, uses 20% of the energy your body produces. The energy is produced from this little structure called the mitochondria. Every one of your cells has mitochondria in it. You can think of mitochondria as the power plant. It produces the energy to help that cell do what it does. Well, if 20% of your body's energy is being used by the brain, you can imagine how much mitochondria is up there. If most of the heat that you lose from your body goes through your head, why is that? Because 20% of your energy is being used up there. Your brain is very active as long as the mitochondria are active. You can have the structure, you can have the function, but if there's no energy, the lights are out, right? So mitochondria is becoming much more of a focus now in what is the health of the brain. Within the mitochondria is this group of guys. And this is called the electron transport chain. As your body takes in sugar, it actually breaks down that sugar into a very tiny component called acetyl-CoA, and that's what's going to go into this process. Looks very complicated, so we won't take too much here, but I want you to focus on that green one there. That green there is called the ATP synthase, and the way it's functioning inside your mitochondria looks something like this. Actively spinning and moving as it's producing energy for your body. Those little blue dots are all the hydrogens that were coming from the consumption of those sugars and movement of other things. Those hydrogens are motivating or causing the motion of this little spinning motor. And your mitochondria has many of them. You'll notice on the bottom level, you've got a red box coming in with 2 dots, but it leaves on the top with 3 dots. That's the ATP on the top. Adenosine triphosphate. 3 phosphates bonded together is a little battery, an energy source that your body is going to use. It looks like this chemistry-wise, and your body weight in ATP is made every day. That's how much energy you need to operate. And that use in your body, the mitochondria produces about 90% of the energy you use, and it's your body weight every day. Your brain consumes 20% of that. Your heart muscles alone have 5,000 mitochondria per cell. So I think your brain cells are pretty close to equivalent on that one. ATP is essential for the stable nerve activity. That's what we're talking about today, is your nerve activity. And it's also needed to sustain your pancreas so that it can handle production of insulin. And all muscle activity is only possible with ATP. Every time you contract a muscle, that took ATP to do it. And so what improves energy production? Good quality oils. Well, we saw that already. Yep, nothing new, but we need more of them. Not so much as fuel, but again, because of the insulation factor. Good healthy oils are going to keep things insulated so that energy can move through without causing any damage. And the long-chain carbohydrates. So mitochondria are most efficient and produce the most energy on sugar. But that doesn't mean I want you to go home and start buying all the Brock's candy that you can. These are the sugars your body thrives on because, as we already mentioned, this is where the fiber comes from. And these foods release their sugar slowly so that you don't get a sugar spike that creates imbalances. So Dr. Dean and Ayesha Sharzai are out at Loma Linda University, and in their research on Alzheimer's, they have discerned that 90% of Alzheimer's cases can be prevented with simple changes in lifestyle or diet. That's what we're talking about here. What are those foods that you can bring into your lifestyle to be able to bring balance and help your brain to thrive? So it's the long-chain carbohydrates and the healthy oils that will help that energy. So with that, I have just a few minutes. We can take any questions. Need me to go back on that one? Questions?
I have so many questions. You live so far away from me. You don't mention, well, avocado oil was mentioned, but not one of your tops, right?
It's not my first choice, but it's all right. It's right there with olive oil. So, how helpful or beneficial are supplements, capsules in particular? Thinking about fish oils, maybe? Capsules of fish oil, or
Just ones that advertise pre and probiotics. They have so many thousands of this and
right. So prebiotics,
make it to the gut. Pre and probiotics.
yep. Prebiotics are the fibers. You can certainly purchase them. They will work. Inulin is one of them that's very popular as a fiber. Or you can enjoy flavors and make your own foods with these fibers in it and maybe save a little bit of money. The probiotics are helpful, can be helpful, in part to be able to get a greater variety of the types of bacteria that are getting into your gut. If you just stick with one type of fermented food over time, your body's not getting the full spectrum of all the different types of bacteria it could get.
Since my husband died of, well, he didn't die of colorectal or rectal cancer, he actually cured it with, but that's a long story. Anyway, with high dose IV, vitamin C and everything, but I have read recently, research shows that children having excessive antibiotic use, either because of chronic tonsillitis or ear infections, that they have a much, much higher rate of rectal cancer. They have all those antibiotics before the age of 10.
So those children that have had high antibiotic use over the years and now they've got a greater risk for colon rectal cancers, their whole microbiome is all disrupted. The community that used to protect that layer and help it function well needs to be reestablished. And any one of the doctors that presented today would be able to help with that.
But of course, our foods, the way we Americans generally eat, don't help replace.
It requires a whole new mindset. Yes. Yep. Good.
Back to probiotics again, there's, like 10 billion, 20 billion, 50 billion. If you do take one, do you take it every day or every other day, and which flavor of the month is best?
Flavor of the month for probiotics. Yep. So you will see 10 billion, 25 billion, even up to 200 billion or so CFUs, colony forming units. That's indicating to you the type of dose that you're getting with the probiotic. Depending on your health condition or what you're addressing, any one of those could be appropriate. One of the ways that you can identify if it's helpful or not is if you take a higher dose probiotic and the next day your bowels are quite loose, then you probably don't need that much. You can back down a little bit. One of the recommendations that I received from a gastrointestinal specialist up in the cities who wrote on probiotics, his comment was he likes to take his probiotics before he goes to bed and allow that probiotic to move through the gut during the nighttime before the next day. So you might start at 10 or 20, or you could start at the higher end and back down. Any other questions? Question?
How do you feel about DHA in older folks taking it?
So DHA is one of the omega-3s. It is very helpful for brain health. So being able to continue to have that cognitive ability, it should be a regular consumption, whether that's going to be in cod liver oil or regular intake of good quality ocean fish. I do recommend wild-caught fish, not farm-raised fish. Farm-raised fish are kind of like confinement lot cattle. They were fed grains, they were fed things that fish don't typically eat. Go for the wild-caught fish that were out roaming the way God designed it, and be able to get those healthy fats from the wild-caught fish.
When would you use like a omega-3 supplement with higher amounts of EPA and
in this event's conversations, I think there is a place for higher levels of the DHA and EPA or the whole omega-3 fish oil group as you're working towards a specific cognitive target. In the general population, I do like to just start with the cod liver oil because it has the vitamin D, vitamin A, and the fish oil, so I'm getting a triple dose of good things in one shot. And I can increase that if needed, but I've also done both, had the omega-3s and the cod liver oil at the same time.
What's a recommendation for a daily cod liver oil intake? Is it tablespoon, teaspoon?
So most supplements that you will find, and I do recommend the liquids as opposed to the capsules, most of those products will do 1 teaspoon per day as their general recommendation. It doesn't seem to be any problem to increase that.
Cod liver oil. I have not taken it, but I've taken fish oil, and I hate the taste. Does cod liver oil have the bad fishy taste?
So cod liver oil is available with lemon flavor. So if the fish oil that you've been having does not have lemon flavor, then you would see an improvement.
Someone suggested to me to put the cod liver oil or liver oil in the refrigerator so the taste isn't so strong. Does that damage the makeup of the cod liver oil or whatever you're taking?
Okay, good question. So I would typically take the cod liver oil during the day, probably with the meal, just to help with the digestion. And I do keep it in the refrigerator. That does help to keep it more stable because it is one of these unsaturated fats that can tend to become rancid if it's not cared for. Yep. Good.
So if you take a spoon of coconut oil in a smoothie every day, and then you have I'm sorry. So if you take coconut oil every day and then you cook with olive oil and butter, can you ever take too much?
So the question is, can you take too much coconut oil and too much olive oil? Not particularly. I've not had a client come into my office yet who was overdosing on coconut oil.
So if someone comes to your office, what do you typically do and what tests do you run?
So typically, when a client comes into my office, I like to sit down with them and go over their health history and learn what their health goals are and where they would like to go with that. Then I have different options depending on the type of testing that would be recommended. So as you'll see on my table, we have the root causes type of consultation where you want to get down to what's causing this symptom, that symptom, and there are some tests that we can look at, whether that's blood tests or urine tests or saliva tests, to identify what are the mechanisms in your body that are off balance. One of the programs that I do most of my work with is called the Foundation to Thrive program, which is a 16-week lifestyle change program where we take these foods and apply them to your life. And the way we do that is get a blood test done that looks at the metabolism in your body and looks at where is it off balance. Is it with the pancreas? Is it with the thyroid? Is it with the liver? And then once I get all of that data, I send it over to Germany, where they match it up with a food database to determine exactly what are the foods your body would thrive on. And I get that list back, and we put together a 3-day menu, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and begin to help you live that lifestyle and walk through those practices for 16 weeks so that you can begin to make it part of your lifestyle. Those are the different options that I have at my clinic.
Is that similar to eating, like eating foods for your blood type?
It is, so the question is that eating foods for your blood type? The answer is no. I do not ask for the blood type of the individual. what is being calculated in there is the measures of your metabolism and all the enzymes and other measures related to good metabolic balance. I don't use blood type at all, but I have read the blood type book that came out around 2008, I think. I did some analysis with that, organized some menus, and my general conclusion with that book is if you eat the foods that are in that book, you will feel better. It's just good whole foods like what we've mentioned up here. So anybody that reads that book and begins to apply that, they're feeding their bacteria, they're balancing their metabolism. This one is not quite the same. I'm looking at your metabolism and saying we need to emphasize in this area. So thank you for attending. We need to transition to our final time, but I'll be happy to hang out and answer some questions afterwards. Thank you.